booktube. My name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Bookends and Books. In this video, I want to talk about a book that I've just read. I finished it about a week ago, and now I have to bring it back to the library. It is the Mesopotamian Riddle. An archaeologist, a soldier, a clergyman, and the race to decipher the world's oldest writing by Joshua Hammer. I thought it was utterly fascinating. The world's oldest writing, it's not quite true. That's just a subtitle. The content of the book is not dishonest, I'm going to say. The content of the book is clearly about, I don't know how to pronounce it, Akkadian, Akkadian? We're going to go for Akkadian. It is the writing, the cuneiform writing, the language Akkadian. And it's not quite the oldest writing, because that particular writing is actually the descendant, if we can call it that, of writing that was used to write a different language, which was Sumerian, which is older language. Well, I suppose it's an older language. It had its apex before Akkadian, and it was, I think, the first language that was ever written on the planet. However, when it was first written, it was not written in this sort of neat form that is cuneiform. It started with pictograms, and then the pictograms evolved to become cuneiform, which is not an alphabet. It is a mix of, a little bit like the hieroglyphs. They are a mix of not pictograms, but of a bit like you have in Chinese, where a single symbol is one word, but also it can be, the same symbols can also have a phonetic meaning. So depending on the circumstances, a word can be the word. It can be a phonetic. Hello, that's my dog. That's Parker. I think it's nearly supper time for him, so that's why he's a bit restless. But I'm going to do this quickly, okay? You'll have supper in 5 minutes, because if I give you supper now, you'll make a lot of noise and I won't be able to film. Do we have a deal? Okay, we have a deal. What was I saying? Oh yeah, cuneiform is not an alphabet. So it's a mix of one-word characters, of phonetic, of syllables, and of characters that sort of are indicators of what is to come. So some sort of grammatical or syntactic indications. So it's a rather complicated form of writing for the Akkadian language, because the same form of writing is used for Old Persian, and that one was deciphered relatively easily by Mr. Rawlinson here. Because Mr. Rawlinson is probably, if you ever heard about the deciphering of cuneiform, it's probably the name you've heard. It's the only name I had ever heard. It's the only story I had ever heard. So when I was in university, so not even, okay, go on the floor. Go on the floor, restless little dog. So when I was in university and I had my history class on antiquity, which covered all the way from the beginning of writing to the fall of Rome, so thousands of years, including Egypt and ancient Greece and ancient Rome and all of that, the only story I was told about how cuneiform was deciphered was that this person, Mr. Rawlinson, had climbed a cliff where there were writings in several languages and figured out what it meant. He copied it after having climbed with ropes, with ladders, up that cliff, and then transcribed whatever the writing was, and then came back to his office and just figured it out. That's basically the story I was told. Turns out it's not quite it. There were more players involved, so the people you see in the corners there, they sort of all have a role, though not quite at the same, to the same extent. So this is Mr. Fox Talbot. He sort of came late to the game. He claimed to be able to decipher it. He did decipher a bit of it, but he was not at the forefront of the research. He based a lot of this, of his deciphering on the work of other people. Other people being, yes, Mr. Rawlinson, who did a lot of work, but also here, Mr. Hinks, Edward Hinks. I don't know if you can see on the picture. He's a clergyman. He's a clergyman from, not necessarily from a very well-known place. He was in some sort of village near, I think near Belfast, somewhere in Ireland, for a clergyman from the Church of Ireland. So that's the Church of England, but on the Irish side of of the border. Yeah, he had parish duties. He celebrated marriages and baptisms and funerals, and he said mass, and he did all of the work that he had to do as a clergyman. He received not a big salary, and he had a wife and children. And despite all of that, he used a lot of his time to try to decipher cuneiform. And at the time, not that many people took him seriously, at least at the beginning. A lot of people thought he was ridiculous, because what can a clergyman who doesn't have any access to the museums, to the archaeology, to any of that, how can he find anything? But it turns out that he had incredible insights about it. And the fourth player on the cover of the book is Henry Layard. So Henry Layard, at first, I think, well, he started to study the law. He was an orphan and his uncle was a lawyer. So he took him in and tried to push him towards the law, but he absolutely hated it. And one day he just decided that he had enough. And one of his friends was going to what was then Ceylon, what is today Sri Lanka, to try to find his fortune as a plantation owner. And Layard decided to follow. And apparently the uncle was very, very relieved, because he thought, oh, you would have been an awful lawyer. So anyway, on the way to Ceylon, they ended up, they went through Mesopotamia, and Layard never left. He never reached Ceylon. He decided that his future was in Mesopotamia because he was fascinated by everything that he was seeing. And he became sort of, I don't know, chief of mission, I don't know if it's that, of archaeological dig. That he worked a lot with Mr. Rawlinson here. So he is basically the one who directed the digs at, I'm going to say something stupid. I think he did both Nimrod and Nineveh. So both of these cities are near Mosul, so in the north of what is today Iraq, of what was then Mesopotamia. Mr. Rawlinson was working in diplomacy, I guess. I think he was working, I read this a week ago, but I forgot the details. I think he was working for the East India Company. So he was based in the backwaters of Baghdad, but he had chosen that place because he wanted to study cuneiform. He wanted to have the chance to put his hands on everything that he could that had cuneiform writing on it. So both of them, Layard and Rawlinson together, are basically responsible for all the cuneiform that you see at the British Museum, all the ancient Mesopotamian, Assyrian, Akkadian, Sumerian artifacts that you see at the British Museum. They are the ones responsible for bringing them there. While they were there were also French digs that were going on, sometimes on the same site. Sometimes they had more or less an agreement, like the French would start on one side of the city and the English would start on the other side of the city. So that also explains why there are so many Akkadian and Assyrian artifacts in the Louvre. So there was a bit of a race between France and England, and England won it to nobody's surprise. If you've ever paid attention a little bit to, if you ever set foot in the British Museum and the Louvre and you compare the two collections, the British Museum won on the Mesopotamian front. Okay, if you hear noise in the background, it's my little dog. He's chasing an octopus. Of course, it's a rubber octopus. Okay, what else? Okay, so this book is absolutely fascinating. It is telling of the race between all of these men plus a few more to try to decipher the cuneiform writing. And as I said, the only story I had ever heard was that of Mr. Rawlinson. And it turns out that Mr. Hinks is actually the one who made the most progress on it. Because Mr. Rawlinson thought that Akkadian was not at all related to Semitic languages. So when he was deciphering it, he was not looking for similarities between Hebrew or Arabic and that language that he was trying to decipher. And also, Mr. Rawlinson was not much of a religious person, so he put no credence at all in the Bible. And when he was trying to find the names of kings, of emperors, of warriors, of battles, of cities, when he was trying to find names that could be recognizable on an inscription put on a cliff, which probably tells of a battle or tells of a great story, a great victory of some sort, He did not look into the Bible for that. He looked into other sources, including sources that at the time, like in ancient Greece, were discredited. So he was a bit on a false start. However, Mr. Hincks, from the start, he supposed that the events, that the archaeology that was found corresponded to the time that was talked about in the Book of Kings and the Book of Daniel in the Bible. And he figured that there would be correlating events that, if not exactly the same, that they would talk about the same things. He thought that the Bible was, to a large extent, a reliable source, not because it came from God, but because it was written a long time ago. That being said, he was a clergyman, probably thought that there was a lot of holiness in the Bible, but he relied on these book of the Old Testament, not so much because it came from the sky, but because they were written at a time where they were talking about events happening at the time when cuneiform was written. So that was one of his great insights, and also he assumed that that Akkadian was related to Hebrew and Arabic and other Semitic languages, and he tried to make make deductions based on that. So character by character, he found some things, and then he published his findings, and his findings got almost no notice, except by Mr. Rawlinson, who at some point ended up realizing that it was full of common sense and sort of redirected his research and continued deciphering Akkadian based on Mr. Hincks' findings. So both of them worked in parallel. They never worked together. They were competitors, which is why it's called a race to decipher the language. So this is what is told in the book. It is absolutely fascinating, and of course at the same time it tells us the history of the searches, so that the rivalry between France and England in Mesopotamia, and it also tells us of the history of these ancient cities of Nineveh and Nimrod and the Assyrian Empire that gave rise to these cities. So this book is a little bit of all of that, and at the very end that's the weird thing about the book. So I reached the end, and just before the notes, there's the acknowledgement. And there is a few explanations as to how he came to, the author came to write the book. So in the acknowledgements, it's normally, thank you to this person who helped me about this topic, and to that person who provided me with this wonderful information. Here's a little passage that left me a little bit meh. My initial hunt for guidance, though, drew a rebuff from a curator at the British Museum. Scowling at me in his office, he advised me to come back, quote, after you've earned your PhD in Assyriology, end of quote. He called the decipherment story impenetrable, assured me that I wouldn't be able to find much information about the principal characters' lives, and threatened, okay, so that's the bit that threw me off, because up to there, it could be a reasonable warning, well, up to a point. It could mean that this curator did not really want to be bothered by a writer who wanted to write about a book and wanted to ask him a whole bunch of questions about the book, and he just wanted to throw him away, saying, oh, it's too complicated, don't do that. Well, you don't know anything in Assyriology, just don't bother, it's really complicated. Just to a certain extent, I can understand that, depending on the tone on which it was said, but then there's this little bit of the sentence, and threatened that he would write a negative critique of my work in the London Review of Books. And I thought, well, that's nasty. You don't even know if the book has been written, and you already guarantee that the review is going to be negative. I thought that was very, very nasty. And also I thought, well, why would you need a PhD in Assyriology to understand how the language was deciphered? Because the decipherment happened in the 19th century, and the history of that was written in English, rather publicly in articles from the Royal Asiatic Society and probably the Geographic Society, in memoirs written by the men of the time, and the sources are in English. So the PhD in Assyriology, I'm not entirely sure it would be necessary, though of course some guidance about some basic facts about cuneiform to know who was right in the first place could be useful. But the negative review, that one I thought, well, that's nasty. And why am I bothered by that? Okay, that's my dog asking for his dinner, for his supper. It's because when you type, before I Googled, there's a name that came to my mind. Parker, just 1 minute. Thank you. There's a name that came to my mind, and I thought, no. I don't want it to be that man who is that rude. I've watched several videos on YouTube by somebody that I think is a curator at the British Museum in the Assyriology department. And he gives wonderful talks, and he gave tons of interviews, and you might be interested in what he has to say about the story of Noah's episode in the Bible, which has its origins much before the Bible. It was in fact a part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I also read in parallel with this, but it's going to be subject of a different video because this is like the 7th version of Gilgamesh that I'm reading. Yeah, so I've seen several videos by this man, and I thought, no, he's a nice man. He wouldn't say something nasty like that. And then I Googled, and if you Google curator, British Museum, Assyriology, there's just one name that comes up. And it's the man that I like, that I enjoy listening on YouTube. It's Mr. Finkel. And I don't want Irving Finkel to be the nasty man in the acknowledgement of the book. And it's weird, but that's like the one take that I have from this book, is that perhaps a person that I enjoy listening to on YouTube, who seems to be very generous with his knowledge and seems to be very open to questions and all of that, is perhaps not always that nice. But then I'm jumping to conclusions. They may very well be other curators in the British Museum. The British Museum does not list all of its employees, so there's not a list of all the curators in the Assyriology department. Mr. Finkel is mentioned somewhere in there, and he's not given the title of curator of the British Museum. He's given the title, some of the title, and that's a weird thing. It's making me wonder, was he given a different title in the text of the book to mask his identity in the acknowledgement? Because I think Mr. Finkel is by far, I say Mr., it's probably Dr. Finkel. He is by far the best known specialist of Assyria on the planet. He has, for Assyriologists, he has a very public profile. So I don't know. I suddenly have doubts. I really hope it's not the case. I hope it's all in my head. So no names are given, so I'm going to erase it from my head and just say that this is a wonderful book, and continue to think that Dr. Finkel is very generous with his knowledge. Even though I have doubts now, but I'll try to erase the doubts. So that's the weird experience I had with this book. The entire book was fascinating, and then I get to the end, and then this little thing nagging me, and I cannot let go of it. So that's the weird experience of the year. The acknowledgement at the end of that book. So anyway, that's it. If you intend to be a judge for the BookTube Prize next year for the nonfiction division, this will be a candidate, I'm pretty sure. Well, it could be a candidate. I'm not master of the list. I don't know, but I humbly suggest it. I think that it's a very good book, and could be a good candidate for the BookTube Prize. It's very interesting. It doesn't have a chance to win, that being said, but it's still a good candidate for the first round. Anyway, that's it for me today. Who knows if I'm going to film something tomorrow, and I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!